Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thanks so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So today's video, we are going to talk all about centerpieces and some centerpiece ideas and what I like and dislike about each kind and the best times to use particular types of centerpieces. So when determining what kind of centerpiece to use for your wedding, you first want to figure out what kind of tables you're going to be using, whether they're going to be round tables or rectangular tables, and if they're rectangular, if you plan on having them connected and long farm style tables, or if they will be individual tables. So first let's start with round tables. Now with round table centerpieces, it's a little bit trickier to fill in that space. So your most basic option, which still looks great, is to do a floral arrangement, which is kind of the most traditional style of centerpiece for your wedding. I recommend when doing a floral centerpiece on a round table to keep them either really low, you can have them low and wide to kind of fill in that space in the center of the table, or to do something that is either clear or really tall so that you're able to see through it so that your guests can speak to one another on the other side of the table and you don't have this big giant thing in the middle of the table so that it's kind of obstructing not only the view from the guests across the table from each other, but also the view they might have of what else is going on during the wedding. So whether that's to see the bride and groom or to see what toast's going on, first dance, anything like that, you don't want something in the table that's going to hugely obstruct their view. Additionally, round tables can be a little bit tricky as it's easy for it to feel empty. It's a little bit more difficult to fill in that space in the center without it being very busy. Also, on that note, if you are planning on having 8 or more at a table, you want to keep your items in the centerpiece, you don't want to overcrowd it. You want to keep it as minimal as possible because the more people you have around a round table, the way that it's set up, once you have, if you're gonna have a full table setting on that table, once you have plates, flatware, cups, everything gets really close together, and the more you have in the centerpiece, if it's spilling out into that, it gets very busy and very overcrowded. So you want to keep it fairly simple if you are planning to have 8 or more at a round table. Some other ideas for round table centerpiece are candles, and you can do a variety of candles here, and I always recommend, if doing candles or something non-floral, to include levels and varying heights. So if you're going to do something like hurricane candles, hurricane vases with pillar candles in them, stick to clusters, and I like to do groups of 3 for things like this, and do varying heights. This way you're creating different levels, it's very pleasing to the eye, and it's very simple and clean on the table. Doesn't feel empty, but it also isn't overcrowding the center of the table. You can also utilize a charger or platform of some kind to increase the levels on the items that are in the center of the table. Additionally, you can do a combination of flowers and candles. And something to keep in mind if you do go this route is to have one of these items be more of the prominent feature in the centerpiece than the other. For example, if you were going to do bud vases and candles, you want to choose which is going to be more of the prominent feature. So if you want the flowers to be more prominent, you're going to have a little bit more bud vases, maybe a little bit more varying heights of those bud vases, and just a few candles to mix in. Vice versa, if you want the florals to just be an extra little pop, then you're going to have more candles, taller candles, and just have a few florals mixed in, or maybe some greenery around the bottom. You don't want them to be competing with each other because, again, it's going to give this feel and look of being a little bit overcrowded and overbearing on the round table. Now let's talk about some rectangle centerpiece ideas. It's a little bit easier to decorate a rectangle table when it comes to centerpieces, but you also have a lot more options, so it can be a little bit more difficult to decide on what works for you. So when it comes to rectangle tables, the main options, the most common options, are to do, again, a floral arrangement, to do some sort of candle arrangement, garland, or loose greenery. So when it comes to a table arrangement, if you are doing just a floral centerpiece, I highly recommend, again, using this kind of rule of 3 and do 3 arrangements to kind of go down the table. And this can either be 3 of the same arrangement, same size, just spaced out so that there is a consistency in the floral arrangement across the table, or doing 1 larger one in the middle and 2 smaller on the end. If you want to do flowers on your table but you don't want to spend the amount that it costs to do a full centerpiece, then bud vases is a great route to go here, and that's basically just having individual stems in small little bud vases. It's very cute, very popular right now. I've had a lot of clients do this, and I love the look of bud vases on a table, and it's a great way to still have flowers on the table but save a little bit of money when it comes to floral centerpieces. So with bud vases, you have the option to just do bud vases all down the table and maybe have some small votives to kind of add that romantic element and include a little bit of extra decor onto the table. Or another thing that I like to pair with bud vases are tapered candles, as this is a great way to include your wedding colors, whether that is a more neutral palette and you're going to let your bud vases kind of be the pop of color, the florals in those. Or if you have a more neutral palette with the colors of your florals in the bud vases and want to add some color in with the taper candles, this is a great way to kind of tie in the consistency of your color scheme and an extra opportunity to add in some color. Another option is to garland across the center of your table. One thing to note with garland, it is on the pricier side than people anticipate because it is pretty labor intensive. So just keep that in mind if you're wanting garland on your table, whether this is just straight greenery garland or garland with blooms in it. Garland does have a very romantic and ethereal look. I love the look of garland on tables. But another thing to note too, if you do plan on doing garland, is make sure that if you are doing a full table setting on your table, and in addition to having a garland across the centerpiece, that your table is wide enough for that. So you might want to set up a full table setting on your table, or even, you know, measure out how wide it's going to be and do it at home and see how much space you have in the middle. I've seen some weddings where they tried to crowd everything in, have a big beautiful garland, but leaves are sticking out and getting people's water cups and on the plates on their place setting. So just keep that in mind and know that if you are having a big farm table style table, this will likely work pretty well for you. But if you have a more narrow rectangular table, it's going to get pretty crowded and you're likely going to have garland spillage onto your table settings. Lastly, similarly to having garland, is you can just do loose greenery on the tables. This is a very classic look. It's also very versatile. You can do just plain greenery across the tables and leave it at that, but you can also dress it up to any level that you would like to match your style for your wedding. So you can have greenery and include centerpieces on top of that, floral centerpieces. You can have greenery and do bud vases. You could have greenery and just do candles. And depending on the type of style you want, if you want a very romantic feel, having big pillar candles with hurricane vases in them lining the tables with greenery gives a very romantic feel. You could also include small votive candles as well. Greenery with taper candles, like I mentioned before, is a great way to include color. If you are just doing greenery across the tables, you can have colored taper candles that will kind of bring that pop of color into your table setting, which is something that I love to do. One thing to note though, if you do plan on doing loose greenery on the table, I highly recommend doing this if you have an indoor setting for your tables. If you are going to have loose greenery on tables that are set outside, if there's any wind, this tends to just blow right off the tables. I have had weddings done before where we had loose greenery on the tables and a huge gust of wind came and just blew all of the greenery off the tables. And so I've learned my lesson since then, and if we are having tables set up outside, I highly recommend going a garland route or doing something that is a little bit more put together in vases, bud vases, an actual floral centerpiece, or just doing candles and opting out of the loose greenery. You can get as intricate and as creative as you want when it comes to centerpieces for your wedding, but here's just some ideas that will hopefully get those wheels turning for you when it comes to picking out centerpieces for your weddings, and some insider wedding planning advice on when to use each kind and what I like about them. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.